All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another live stream. Like I said, we are going to be trying to do these more often. Let me know if the audio is good in the comment here in the live chat over here. Just hit me up. Today's topic: Powerstroke upgrades as a whole. So pretty much, this is a big topic. There's really anything out there. While I'm waiting for questions to populate in the live chat, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of start talking about some of my favorite upgrades to do to both, really to any of the power strokes out there, starting with some reliability things. So I think the 6.7 is one of the best ones to start talking about reliability upgrades. Thank you guys for joining in. Glad to have you. Don't forget to get in the live chat and hit that like button. So for the 6.7, I think probably the biggest reliability upgrade that's out there is definitely one of the disaster prevention kits. I have not personally installed this on my truck yet. It is in the very near future because, well, I need to. I do want to install the DCR pump, which is, I think, probably the best answer to the CP4 problem that's out there. But I do plan to do the disaster prevention kit first, and then down the road, maybe a year or so later, we'll look at doing a DCR on our 6.7. In Josh's 6.7, he did already install a disaster prevention kit. All right. Vernon, good to have you from Jacksonville, Florida, brother. Thank you for joining in the live chat. And any questions or anything you want to bring up, really hit me in the live chat. I'm happy to get involved. I love when you guys get involved in that live chat. It makes the live streams a lot of fun and just a cool, unique place to come talk about diesel trucks. So, sticking with the 6.7 and the fuel system, this is actually one of my next upgrades. A lot of people don't know this, but the upper fuel filter is prone to cracking on those trucks. So they crack, and they have caused more than one or two fires. I have not personally experienced this yet. I do not personally know anyone, but I've seen a lot happen online and people talking about it. So one of the future, or hopefully pretty soon, upgrades to our 6.7 is going to actually be H&S Motorsports makes a billet adapter that'll hook up to the factory lines and then let you put a screw-in fuel filter on there. So that is going to be one of the coming upgrades for that truck as well. Tony, good to have you. I'm glad I was able to help you save a lot of headaches because I know these trucks, both of them, can be a bit of headaches. So I'm glad I've been able to help at all. Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Anybody, guys, we got 7 people in here. We don't have any likes on the video yet, so let's get some likes up there. And then also, please feel free to join in the chat, guys. It makes it a lot of fun. Tony, what kind of truck do you have? What year are you looking at? While I'm waiting to hear from Tony over here, we're going to quick switch gears to the 6-liter because I think there's some cool, obviously, reliability upgrades there. Not like a true mod here, but something for the 6-liter. I think it is just super important to make sure that you have a monitoring system for these trucks. So what's cool about the monitoring system and a 6-liter, I'm a big fan of the Edge series. Banks, if you have an 05 or newer, is really good as well on them. I don't know if Banks has a good one for the early ones. There were some changes that happened in a few different things. I know there's some products that are available for 05 through 7. That aren't there for the 03, 04 model years. So don't quote me on that, but the data, the iDash from Banks is obviously a really good monitor. But why I consider this a reliability upgrade on the 6-liter is because it allows you to start tapping into stuff. So you can check your oil cooler spread, make sure that you are keeping within that 15 or lower degree temperature for them. It really will help prevent blowing your oil cooler because you'll be able to tell when it's bad. So there'd be very few instances of this once you're keeping an eye on that. Also for your FICM, being able to tell when your FICM's starting to fail. This next one does require hooking up a universal gauge to it, but you can check your fuel pressure. Fuel pressure on 6-liters, if you let that drop, you will kill injectors. 45 PSI is the minimum. I like to be more around the 50 to 55 range. I've run as high as 70, 75 technically when I didn't have a regulated return on the truck. I fixed that now, but some things to consider there. Tony, an 06 450, man. I want to have a 450 at some point in my life. I know they are, in many instances, a lot of overkill, but I think they're cool. I think they're just an awesome truck. I hope to one day have one. I'd even consider eventually buying a 6 liter 450. I think that'd be cool. But awesome truck. Vernon here, we have any upgrades for the O2 bone stock 7.3? So 7.3s I think are cool trucks. I don't know too many people that would argue that 7.3 is not a cool truck. What I would do first, a lot of people have said this, I would be looking at upgrading the transmission cooler. A very common upgrade used to be people would put 6 liter transmission coolers in there. Couple reasons. One, reasonably inexpensive. And two, you get a big upgrade. I know Mishimoto makes a kit. Many of you know I'm not the biggest Mishimoto fan, but I would definitely look at increasing the transmission cooler, help keep your transmission nice and healthy. You could also look at going to a aftermarket intercooler. A lot of people, again, will put 6 liter intercoolers in. Because they are bigger than the 7.3 intercoolers, and I believe they're a pretty much drop-in replacement. So you could go check that out. Those would be two, like right off the top of my head. Again, for a 7.3, I would still get a monitor. Transmission upgrades, I would definitely also look at a transmission pan, going to something a little bit bigger with that thicker flange to help prevent any flex in the transmission case. They're not bad transmissions in stock form. They don't hold a ton of power if you really start going to them, but they can be built to be complete monsters of transmissions. On a 7.3, I'm trying to think because they didn't really have IDM issues. One thing, they're just getting to be older trucks. I see this with my 04, and I'm working on fixing this. I would be looking at maybe running some additional ground wires, maybe a new crossover power wire from left to right. Those would be some of the first things I'd probably consider doing with a 7.3, like if I bought one tomorrow. But the 7.3 is a great engine. It didn't make a ton of power in factory configuration, but that is part of the allure of. You hear people call them dinosaurs. They're just terribly reliable trucks. I would also consider maybe an exhaust brake of sorts in there. Those would be some of the things I would look to probably do if I had a 7.3. If you don't have an exhaust, I would go with a 4-inch exhaust, like a 3.5-inch downpipe to 4-inch exhaust out the back. Probably getting a fresh set of intercooler boots on there, or even just new pipes to begin with. In that, like with all those upgrades I just listed, you don't negatively impact anything. You keep all the reliability of everything. You also keep a lot of, you might lose a little bottom end torque with that setup, but in the scheme of things, a lot of it's going to stay. They're just going to increase the performance of the truck in several different ways. So those would be my initial upgrades if I had a 7.3, or if someone brought me a 7.3 and said, hey, mod this, but I don't want to go too out there. Fortunately, they hold head gaskets pretty well. They don't like a ton of power. Like if you wanted to get into a little bit of power with a 7.3, I'd be looking at like a 180 stock nozzle injector, and just kind of a tow tune and a street tune for that. And that'd be a nice, fun truck to drive while still keeping a lot of reliability here. Here, bro, it's pause truck status when you show up in a 350 or better. I really would love to have a dually at some point. I want to tow with a dually. I've only ever towed with single rear wheel drive trucks, and I do like them, but I just would love to compare a dually to a single rear wheel that's set up similar. Like I would definitely still want airbags on it. I'd like it to be a relatively apples to apples comparison. Like if someone had a 15 or 16 350 dually that was similar to mine, I would love to tow with it just once, just to kind of compare it. It'd probably be bad because I'd probably want to just buy one then. Eric, how you doing, brother? I scored an 07 Lariat dually, motors toast. The motor toast part, that sucks. Eric, what are you looking at doing to that? Eric, I can't remember because I know I've seen you in the chats before. Are you towing? You one of my guys that tows a lot, or what led you to getting a dually as opposed to a single rear wheel? Was it just the price? And what kind of engine mods do you want to do? See, when you get into the dualies, I kind of change how I want to set them up a little bit. Like on a 6-liter dually, I need a 4K engine used. Yeah, that's probably your best. I mean, I will say junkyard engines, there's plenty of them out there that are other than dropping them in, setting them up, are pretty turnkey. You might have some issues. If you have it out and you can, or you're inclined, you could always throw a fresh head gasket in there with some O-ringed heads. But I know a lot of guys that have just dropped junkyard engines in and ran with them and had good success. Obviously, there's risk there. Don't get me wrong. But when I get into dually builds on 6 liters, one, you got to remember you have a heavier truck. You have more tire, like more rotating mass you have to turn because you got 2 extra tires. Um, I would love, like, if I was doing a dually build, it's gray with chrome package. Oh, dude, that's awesome. You'll have to send me some pictures over on Instagram or something, brother. That sounds killer. But I would love to just have I'd probably go with a 175 stock nozzle injector just because I love that injector for most builds. Great all around size, capable of low 500s with the right turbo setup, but can be tuned to really just tow really, really well. You get a good tow tune in there, maybe like 50 horsepower with a slightly larger turbo, and just you're going to love that truck. And I would go back and forth. I'm lucky in the sense of I can pretty easily get a turbo from my sponsor to test stuff with if I wanted to be in this situation. But I'd really have to fight back and forth between a stage 1 and a stage 2 with the 10-blade exhaust side on it. Because initially I want to say go with a stage 1 for that build because it's going to spool faster. It's just going to be better for towing. But at the same time, I think the stage 2 spools really fast and could handle it. I'd have a hard time. That'd be an interesting video to do, actually, would be to basically with the same camper and injector setup, literally compare those 2 turbos back to back with just maybe a small upgrade or, modification to the tuning itself would probably be required to get the best of both. But that would be a super cool build. What's the best suspension mod for dualies? I hate how it drives while not under load. Everything is stock now. Tony, that's gonna be a tough one. With the 06, what I would be looking at would be, I think it's PMF suspension. I'm gonna quick look them up here. They're probably your best bet for getting some kind of, and I don't know with the 450 what's different, but I would be looking at, you can get like custom length coil suspension for them. I would definitely talk to these guys. I would be looking at probably a 4-link. Some of this stuff gets pretty expensive, so please bear with me. I'm not throwing that to the side because I understand that some of this stuff is expensive, but they have a ton of suspension upgrades. Here we go. They have dual rate coil springs for up front. They're a little pricey at $350. And then if you add custom length, I think they're, let's see here. What is the standard? I don't even know what the standard is because everything's plus something. So if you have a 1.5-inch lift on that, which is their smallest option, you're looking at $384 for a nice dual rated spring from Icon. I think that would help. I don't know. You would have to call them, but I'm pretty certain that should fit that setup. I would really look at some of their other suspension stuff. I'd look at maybe their 4-link. I think that would be helpful for you. You have very high rated springs in the rear of that truck. That's part of it as well. So if you don't address that, but then you lose a lot of towing capacity. So you could look at going to a lighter, thicker pack, like maybe more leaves, but thinner, so they kind of have a little more play in them. And then you could airbag it to keep your capacity up when you needed to tow. That definitely gets a little tricky with the 450s. There also isn't a ton of 450 stuff up there because typically people aren't modifying a ton of them. I'm all for it. I think all 450 should be modified just because it'd be fun. But you do kind of start getting into an area where there's not a lot of people doing stuff. That's probably what I would look at. Probably those Icon springs, a 4-link up front, and then I'd consider maybe pulling a leaf spring or two out and airbagging it, which you might want to go to a thicker block if you're pulling leaves out. But I would definitely give the guys at a PMF suspension a shout, because they probably have some of the best suspension stuff out there for the Fords. They've gotten into other stuff too, but they started out as mostly Ford, but pretty much all their stuff's made in America. That's definitely where I would go. Lifted Euro 6 with rough country, entry level 6-inch lift. I have a rough country lift on my truck. I have a 2.5-inch suspension lift. I am considering using their 1.5-inch lift on my 16, but I am considering those PMF Icon dual rated springs as well. Hammer Down Motorsports, what's up, brother? How you been, man? I swear we are going to get together once I finally have my 6-liter ready to race you. Only problem now I have driveline shutter, so I ordered it back. Yeah, that's an easy one to fix. A lot of people, when you start lifting it, they don't think to add, like, they don't think it sounds like those shim kits, or I don't think I used some people just get like it's a hollowed out piece of metal that they use that's more of a bigger drop bracket, but that should fix your stutter pretty easily on that. It did mine, and it did my brother's as well. Just do blocks in the rear so you can keep all the rear springs. That is true. If I'm trying to think I lied. That's not true. I heard 450s also had a reinforced frame. I'm not 100% sure if the 450s had reinforced frames or not. I don't know. I don't know enough about the 450s to give enough information. I know it's different, and I don't think a lot of people are making stuff for 450. Let's Google that. F450 suspension upgrades. It's a commonly searched thing, I can tell you that. Looks like there are some kits out there. Striker Off-Road Design has a kit for 455. Oh, those are newer 450 550s, but trying to see. Okay, so it's becoming a more popular thing, which it used to be like nothing. That's a very basic thing. Also, while you're doing it, is looking at getting a good set of shocks. Find out if you're going to lift it or not, because the parts I referenced are all lift kit stuff, like 1.5, 2.5-inch lifts. But getting a good set of shocks in there, I ran, Bilsteins on my 15. I thought they made a difference. I need to look at what I'm going to run on my truck now, but I do plan to get some upgraded shocks for that in the near future. It definitely needs them. I believe the 450. I don't know if they're longer. They're definitely thicker. I know in 08 they went to a longer leaf spring, which helped increase like overall ride comfort. They rode a little nicer in 08 when they went to the longer rear spring. Not lifting it all tall now, just still learning. Tony, I would double check, because with the springs that are on there, it might be the equivalent of a lighter spring lift. Because probably a 450 probably has one of the higher rated coil springs in there. So, for instance, my 2015 truck came with higher end springs in it. It had the snow prep package on it. What that did is basically gave it like a 2-inch lift over the normal factory height. So my 15 actually sat a little higher than my 2016 is, because my 16 doesn't have any. So I would double check that as well. And again, those guys, it looks like there are some people out there doing, lift kits and such. So there's probably some people that know what to look for with that. Unfortunately, I am not one of them. Although now I feel like I need to kind of spend some time learning that. It's all to prevent the squat. Yeah, though if you made that leaf spring longer, you would actually increase the squat of that with the same amount of leaf springs than the 350 counterpart, because there'd be more tension on it. Whereas if you had a shorter one, you would actually have a stiffer and you'd get less sag out of it, but it wouldn't ride as nice. 6-inch lift, 4-link coilovers. Gregory, your truck sounds like it's got the works, man. Who'd you do you say who you went with? So King coilovers. Yeah, getting into coilovers becomes very expensive. Uh let's just look up F250 King coil over conversion kit. $2,000. Oh, that's not even a kit. Looks like the kit might be more like 2200, and that's just doing the front. Whew. That is rough. I will say this: I've never known someone that did that didn't absolutely love it. It is a tough pill to swallow. I will say that. Full traction, 10K. Oh my goodness. I've heard of full traction before. I don't know that I've ever really looked at any of their stuff, but I have certainly heard of them. They have some nice looking stuff. So Tony, I think, was asking. Tony, there's definitely some options out there to look into and get involved with. They are cool. They are, again, the 450 is cool. The problem with modifying 450s is you're going to run into some stuff that isn't as common as it is on the other 250s and 350s. And even 350s dualies, while I wouldn't say you have a hard time finding stuff, you do kind of need to find some specific stuff for it. So there is that. Definitely, they both kind of start to get into an area where you're going to have a harder time finding stuff, but definitely a cool area to be in, because I remember once installing a sound system when I had a 150 crew cab. I had an 01 150 crew cab, and I wanted to put two 12-inch subs in it under the rear seat. And I found a company making a box. It was a super big pain in the butt to fit everything in. Nothing really fit nicely. And I was wrestling it in with my brother, and I was getting annoyed. And he looked at me and he goes, dude, when you want stuff that other people aren't doing, this is some of the headache you're going to encounter. It's going to be fine when it's done. And he was right. Once it was done, I loved it. It sounded great. But it is one of those things that when you're doing things that isn't as common or as popular, you do have a little extra research into stuff. You do have a little bit of a headache to make all of those things happen. But definitely worth the time and effort, because the end product you're going to absolutely love once it's done. So, well, while we're on suspension upgrades here, why don't we talk about some of those? Because one of my favorite upgrades for the Super Duty lineup really is a set of airbags. I took relatively heavy, 13,000 pounds is my camper. The problem with the newer trucks is they're trying, and it's not really a problem per se, they're trying to make them drive nicer. So how you do that with a leaf spring truck is you make the leaf springs not as stiff. So even though the truck can handle a lot of towing capacity, the springs will sag a fair amount. And you can take some time playing around with this to get it exactly how you want. For instance, I'm going to be adding a rear block to my kit. I don't know why I just don't trust airbags. That's fair. Like I don't think you're wrong in having a trust issue. What I like about airbags is worst case scenario, you don't really lose anything. Like if one blows on you, that would suck, and not be any fun. I'd be furious. I'd be flipping out, to be honest. But you lose an airbag, this is why I don't like pulling leaf springs, is because I want at least my factory payload capacity to be there. So if I lost an airbag, like I'm going to go to a slightly bigger block in the rear so I can run less pressure in them. But it's not like the end of the world. Now I do know there's other guys that like something that engages your the sumo spring is one of the other things people use. I don't care for them as much because I like the capacity to be able to mess with stuff. Eric, I agree with one caveat is they are made of rubber. They do age. I do think you should be keeping an eye on them. For instance, my '04 truck sat for a long time. That being said, they hold pressure still and they look in great shape. I do think people should be checking that. Make sure that they're in good shape. For these trucks, I mean, again, I tow 13,000 pounds. I have run them as high as 40 just because I thought it was cool when I first got them, and then realized I was running way too much pressure. So in my 6 liter, I like my airbags more around 20. I think my sweet spot was really like 23 to 26. I liked, or maybe 27, but that was enough. So let's just call that 25 and I'll quit being goofy about it. But 25 psi worked really, really well. I'd have but this is where setting it up for your truck, because on my 667, I find that to keep my truck at least level, I need to run like 40, 45, which is way too much pressure in those. So I'm going to increase the rake of my truck. I might even put another spring in there as well. I'm not trying to mess up the ride quality I have because I have pretty good ride quality in the truck, and I don't want to mess that up. But I would like to go raise the rear a little bit, especially in line with I'm going to raise the front like 1.5 to 2 inches. So I want to keep it so I have a little bit of rake. The rear should sit a little bit higher. And I basically want to set my rear leaf springs up so that I can run them at like that 20 to 30 psi range. Yeah, 10-inch lift is going to squat pretty good when you're towing. That's just the other thing people don't realize when you're doing the lift springs on a lot of these kits. They create that extra height in two ways. The arch of the spring itself is more aggressive, and then they add a little extra down low, but those springs aren't full length springs. So you end up with a overall better ride quality, but you lose payload capacity when you do that. So that's why people with the big lifts, and I will say this, I don't know how. I'm sure somebody makes a bracket out there to modify, because what you have with a 10-inch lift is you have a lot more travel in your suspension. So you'd probably want to be looking at something that might be a custom airbag setup to be able to tolerate your lift kit safely. I would say anything over 6 inches, you probably need to be getting into custom airbag setups to be able to safely. I don't know. Maybe someone's out there. Let's see if I can find something quick that's running like a custom airbag setup for a lift that much that can tolerate the travel. 6-inch lift airbag. Okay, so there looks like there's some kits out there. Here's a long travel airbag this is for an 08 through 16 250, 4x4 long travel for a 4.5-inch lift. So there are some kits out. They're expensive. They're grand. They're more than double what you're buying these kits for. They're from Carly, so their quality at least. Supports up to 12 inches of travel. So there you have it. If I was running your setup, I would be looking at something like that to be able to safely have the travel in the airbag I need to not mess with my suspension. I think guys kind of forget that sometimes when they have these big lifted. I have heard of guys with bigger lifts having issues with airbags, but it's because your suspension travels so much more. It's a lot more stressful on that bag. I need to remember before my next live stream to get cough drops. I can already tell my throat's getting a little sore, but we will continue on. If you guys haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Please get in the live chat with us, ask any question or comment. Where are you guys from? Anything down there, hit that up. Also, don't forget to hit the like button on this video if you haven't already. Sumo springs, like Tony brought up, is another viable option. I've never messed with them much. Let me quick pull them up. If memory serves, these go over your overload springs, I believe, and engage them sooner. I think that's the whole logic behind them. Oh, here's one that just has it as the bump stop. So it goes in place of the bump stop and just gives you some extra support. Looks like there might be a few different ideas behind these. So that's kind of neat. But it looks like as they compress, they give you more pushback to stabilize you. So your new dually might not be toast. So Eric, what I would try to do to determine if you actually have like a bottom end issue, and maybe this is what you did to determine that, would be to, if you go to your passenger side battery, you can find the jumper, the cable that goes to your starter, and you can disconnect it. Put that piece just on your positive terminal. Excuse me. Do not have your key in the truck or the ignition on or anything, but just kind of jump that starter is what the people refer to it as. It'll crank the truck, but it won't try to start it. Don't do it too long, but just 5 seconds, and listen for a nice even crank and look for any dips in there. If there's a dip, that could be an issue. Rod and hock, but on top. I'd open the valve covers and see if you have any broken valve rocker arms, because that's kind of what that'll sound like. It's almost exactly what that should sound like, actually. The other thing is, depending on if it's an exhaust or intake one, sometimes you can get like a puff pushing out of your air intake. So that's another thing to consider with all that. I actually have a video talking about that a little bit, because I broke a rocker arm in mine. So I would say my next step would be to open up the valve covers and start inspecting each of your rocker arms. Joe, you're correct. However, I think if you have a compression issue, oh, no, hold on. Now that I think about this, because if your rocker arm is causing the compression issue in your truck, what I talked about really wouldn't solve anything. You'd still kind of be left with questions. So I would say your next step, and it's free, it just takes your time, I'd pull your valve covers off and see if you have a bad rocker arm, in which case you pull one head bolt out and replace it and put it back in. I wouldn't recommend like pulling a bunch out or studying an engine all at, one at a time. But if you're just pulling one bolt out or stud and putting it back in, you should be fine with your truck. So that's what I would look at doing to replace that. Again, that's if you had it. I had that issue. Scared the crap out of me, because it did sound like rod knock is what I thought it was. It makes a freaking awful noise, partially because that compression is pushing out your intake, so it starts to cause like some surging. It can cause some surging with your turbo as well. So hopefully that's all it is, dude. If it's just a broken rocker arm and you pick that up for a steal of a price, that's a freaking win. So yeah, Joe, I agree with you overall. I still like to do that test in the sense of it does give you an idea of maybe you can kind of locate that sound a little bit. You're saying it sounds like it's on top end. I would definitely get those valve covers off, which I am. Did I release that video? I may have released the video where I pull the. I actually think I do. I think I have both sides out actually of pulling valve covers off. So here's my crankcase vent. Delete. Glow plug, harness, oil leak. I lied. I only have one side out. I think that might be the other video I started working on now. Yes, that's the video I'm editing right now where I talk about how to do, where I'd start talking about how to replace the valve cover gasket on the passenger side. So, uneven crank could be taught yet. Starter turnover could show compression issues. Yeah. So Joe and King, you guys are actually saying pretty much the same thing. You're both correct. Is that it wouldn't show, it would show a compression issue. It wouldn't show like bearing failure. The only real way to look at bearing failure would be to drain the oil and see. And that wouldn't let you know if it started to have bearing failure and currently it's okay. You wouldn't really see that in an oil change, although you could still see it. Don't get me wrong. It has the wind. It's completely. Oh, dude, that's so nice though. It really sucks. It really sucks that you're. Sorry, I had a little indigestion. It's super uncomfortable right now. An untouched truck is nice. It sucks that you have to fix some stuff with it right now, but having just an untouched truck otherwise is awesome. I need to go back over. Let me see what my BD Diesel link is. Oh, the throttle sensitivity booster. I don't know that I love the throttle sensitivity booster. It was. I shouldn't say I don't love it. It's cool. It's cool. It's not amazing. Or that's not the beat. No, that's a different link. Stream reported there's no upgrades going on here. Well, what would you like to talk about? I don't know how to say whatever that name is. But we definitely were talking about upgrades on. Well, I should say that is true. You did catch us at a point where we did switch topic to fixing something. So, yes. But please, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions on upgrades. We have talked a fair amount about upgrades if you want to look in the chat. So Eric, if the engine's okay and you just have to fix a rocker arm, what are the first upgrades you're going to look at doing to it? That because man, if you scored a 6 liter that you just have to buy a rocker arm for and a day or two of your time messing around with stuff. Because they do break rock, like that's not a terribly uncommon thing. So Pro Source Diesel has $250 for a rocker arm. Looks like you can get the whole assembly though. Oh no, that's for a 6.4. Ignore what I was about to say. 4-inch lift in 20s. Tony, I agree. He sounds a touch unhappy. He can report my stream. That's fine. I don't care. I mean, I do this to really help people. So if he has a question or wants to know about upgrades and stuff, like by all means. But how I run the live streams is I have a background topic, and that's what the title typically is. I I let the chat determine it. So the more involved people are in the chat, it really drives the rest of the live stream. And a lot of times, like upgrades is a safe background topic because a lot of times we're talking about upgrades by default, but you can ask anything diesel related, or I mean, I guess sometimes people ask questions a little outside diesels, but as long as it's appropriate, I typically will take time to answer it. Oh, Eric, so you already have a core engine ready to go, so you're just pulling the rocker arm off and putting it on. That's perfect, man. That's true. Changing anything can be an upgrade. Dude, if you guys saw all the wild stuff that has been said to me over the years of doing this channel, man, some people are just unhappy and will do anything to try to rile you up. They'll have to try harder because anybody can insult me. It doesn't bother me. But yeah, I've actually thought about doing that at some point, like looking for some of like the meaner comments people have left. Trying to think of a recent one. Someone said, someone called me fat and lazy a month or two ago, which isn't terribly I mean, I'm not lazy. I could stand to lose some weight for sure. So that was one that happened recently. Stuff like that happens. It is what it is. It doesn't really bother me. It used to when I first started. That was like, man, somebody would leave like a rude comment. It would set me off. But not now anymore. Whatever. You like the channel, you don't. I'm trying to do my best. And for the most part, I've built a pretty cool community of people that like the stuff I do here. So people like the live streams. I want to grow these back. The live streams used to get like 50 or 60 people in them. And that was like a ton of fun for me back when that was happening. That was before I stepped away. I'm trying really hard to build this back and get a lot of momentum again. And that's going to take a lot more work because once you achieve something and then you lost it in YouTube, like YouTube doesn't really help you rebuild initially. So they don't push your video out as much. So it's going to take a lot of work for me to really kind of get the channel back. But I'm very dedicated to doing that. So stay tuned. We're going to do some cool stuff. Josh is doing well. I was actually originally going to start the stream around 9 o'clock, and he popped over. So I was hanging out with him for a little bit before I did this, but he's doing very well. He's very busy with work. He bought a 2016 250 Platinum crew cab short bed, black, gorgeous truck. But he's doing well. Thank you for asking, Eric. I appreciate it, man. Upgraded adrenaline. hpop failed after 2. Man, so I've heard about people having issues with the adrenaline hpops. I run a CNC fab, and I don't think I've been kind to it in the sense of it probably has. It's definitely got more than 10,000 miles on it. It then sat for 4 years and then is acting like nothing happened. Like that's the same one I'm running. I didn't replace it. I didn't do anything to it. We literally just popped it in the new engine and it's been fine. So if you were looking for one to Eric, that's funny. My endorsement for high pressure oil pumps in the 6-liter is definitely CNC Fab, a good small company. I like their stuff. I have considered upgrading mine to their stage 2 because I have the 20530s, though technically the stage 1 seems to be running it just fine. I do plan to test that a little bit in the future. But yeah, I'm considering upgrading in the future to a stage 2. Jay, what's up, man? Welcome to the channel. If you haven't, please hit that subscribe button already. Don't forget to give the video a like. You're going to struggle with the front end. Cannot get the bearings on the spindle. I don't have the press tool. Any tips? The shaft is already installed. Wait, all right, so hold on. Do you mean you can't get like the wheel bearing assembly on the steering knuckle, or do you mean you can't get the vacuum seal that sits inside the steering knuckle on there? So that if you can quick give me that, because that'll change kind of my answer depending on what's going on. Because if you can't get the wheel bearing assembly on, that is one that doesn't require a specialty tool, and that shouldn't be an issue. But if you can't get that vacuum seal in, there is a way to do it, which is basically, I'm trying to think of how to explain it. So if you have the shaft in, one, make sure you took all of the old one off. Because I know I had that issue of I pulled part of it off and then didn't realize there was another small metal piece still on the axle shaft. Vacuum seal. Okay. So the first thing I would do is double check and make sure you pulled all of the old seal off. There was a little metal piece still on mine that I had to then hammer off before I could put it on. So that's the first thing. I don't know if I highlighted that in my recent video. I don't know if that's what brought you here, but I did a video not long ago replacing all of that stuff on my 6-liter. Make sure all the old ones off there. There was like a thin metal piece around there that didn't quite look like it belonged, but it didn't willingly come off with the rest of it. I was then able to hammer that off and put the seal on. What I would do, especially if you have it already seated in there, is you need to be very careful. There isn't going to be a socket big enough. I'd probably look for a blunt, like object type deal, like almost like I don't want to say a punch. I have some tools for my pop-up that were other tools that he turned into something else, and I just call them punches, but they got pretty flat edges, and I would probably lightly just kind of tap in circles until I got it to sit on there correctly. I started it by hand, so that is definitely one thing. I like starting it by hand, maybe pulling the axle back out. If you have like a workbench or a vise you could set it in, it might give you better to like just kind of be able to lightly tap all the way around. Don't try to push it on more. U-joint replace part here. Okay. Don't try to like if you pull that off and start trying to hammer it on lightly around. I wish I wish you were nearby and I had the right one for you. I would just lend you the tool. It does suck because they're like $50 or so for that tool, but it does help a lot. But if I would pull it out, get it on a workbench or in a vise or something, and what I would do is just lightly keep tapping around until it sat all the way on. I tried a 4-inch PVC union tapping the edges. I will say this, it takes like some force to get it on there. A PVC union is not a bad idea, though. I would say if I had to guess, it probably breaks. If it's really not just sitting on there, like it should at least start by hand relatively easily. What I would do is I would pull it all out. I'd make sure that all of the old one is off because there can be a very small metal piece that sits on there that looks like it's part of the drive shaft, like that yoke part, but it's not. I don't know if I highlighted that well in my. Let me find you the video. I don't know if. Did you watch my most recent video with that? If not, I want to send you a link to it. Here we go. Here's the link to the video. I'm not sure if you watched this already, but that's where I was doing it and I showed like using the tool. But I do think I highlighted in there. Well, apparently it'll let me play this while I'm just trying to quick find the spot that I would have talked about it. All right, I think I'm almost there. Oh, went too far. But it is a little bit of a bugger without the tool. You don't need it. My brother's done it without the tool. I don't think I highlighted it enough to be super helpful. Tear it back off and just make sure that all of the old one is off of it. Because that's going to be your hardest part to deal with. If that's on there, it won't go on. That's the issue I had. I went in, pulled everything back apart, realized that piece comes off, and then I was able to get it on. Does the MAF sensor affect performance given the changes over the years from early to late? Your harmonic balancer spring and had a slight wobble seemingly. How do I diagnose that? So the MAF sensor most definitely still has a say. The exception to this would be 05, which did not have a MAF sensor. I don't think any of the 05s had it, which is weird because it does have the plug in the wiring harness for it. So that is kind of a goofy thing with that, but the MAF sensor will directly impact performance without a shadow of a doubt. After ignition. So check all your wiring with that as well, because that's in an area some of those wires wear down and they can short out. But a MAF sensor will directly. So the things that mess with VGT performance as a whole: exhaust back pressure sensor, even a bad one, even if it's not really reading it, in my opinion, I feel like it still does. Your MAP sensor, so reading boost, and your MAF sensor all will affect this. Double check wiring to each of these sensors, including your VGT pigtail. And obviously the VGT solenoid itself will have a play. For balancers, they do wear out. That is a thing. The other thing to consider with them, if you upgrade and don't keep with a stock one, you are very likely to destroy your low pressure oil pump on these trucks. So you need to be careful if you upgrade your balancer. I forget exactly which one. I have one of the fluid dampener things in there. Hey Jay, thank you, man. And again, please let me know what it is. In any of my videos, just the next one that comes out or something, or come back to this and just drop a chat. I want to learn with you guys as well. Especially as something challenging comes up. And I didn't check all of that in my video to see if I commented on exactly what it is, but I know it can be a tough time. Ronald, what issue are you having? So you notice that you drop in tone with turbo after 15 seconds. So the first thing I would double check is I would read your VGT percentage. What's your duty cycle of it? It's a measured in percentage. So between 15 and 85% is what the computer can command on VGT duty cycle. 85% means the vanes are closed. The only time you should really see this is at idle, depending on the tune you're running. There are some factory strategies that will sweep the vanes, meaning they'll go to like 3 different positions and you'll actually get a very different idle. Ones that very deep, like V8 rumble. Some people call those rumble tunes when they have them. And the ones that close it shut can cause more of that hissing whistle noise to come from your turbo that many of us really like. Some people kind of can't stand it, but it goes back and forth a lot on those. Do you feel like you're having a lack of power? The other thing when you have a turbo issue is we're quick to blame sensors. And one of the things, as these trucks get older, you got to start looking more and more. This was an issue when the trucks were only a couple years old. They're just parts fail. Do you have a crack in your Y pipe, or is something not seated correctly anymore? It can be subtle. Like, to really check for an exhaust leak, you need to get soapy water, spray down your exhaust manifolds where they bolt to the head, start looking for bubbling. I didn't think I had one. But I got to tell you, when I realized I had an issue, I found out towing had major performance issues. Finished my trip, got the truck home, and then found that I had like two different exhaust leaks on the truck, on the exhaust manifolds. So monitoring EGTs, I think, is definitely a must. However, it shouldn't really affect your performance. New turbo, stock 450/60, sat for 9 months. Bad mechanic. I changed all injectors. Nice, man. You did some work. All right, so it's a new turbo, so we can rule turbo vane issues out. You should, and yeah, it sounds like you have the right VGT solenoid, and the brand new one should be perfectly fine. I would start looking for exhaust leaks, and technically boost leaks as well could cause this all as well. So making sure, I hope you did all of your intercooler boots. If not, I'd be looking at intercooler boots. I'd be looking at the intercooler itself. If you pull back the cover to the intercooler, you can actually look at where it meets up to the end caps, and there's a gasket in there, and sometimes that gasket blows out. So I would be looking at those. Trying to think what else that would cause performance issues. Okay, so you're already looking at those things. That's where I would start. Making sure all your connections are in there. But before you mess with the turbo too much, I'd look at some of those other places, because they definitely can cause some of the issue you're having. Some kind of monitor that'll let you read that duty cycle. If you're driving and your duty cycle is pegged at 85, that's telling you that something's not reading correctly. It's not registering the right amount of boost, so it's trying to build more boost. Or if it feels like it's building too much, it might go to 15%. Yours would, that's probably, I would still do that test. In your instance, that's probably not the most helpful thing, but it's a pretty quick test. Go for a drive, 5 minutes down the road, and you should. Okay, so you're using a monitor system. Good. I would double check your VGT duty cycle. I would measure that with boost as well. If you're maxing out at 18 psi of boost and you're flooring it, and your VGT duty cycle is at 85%, that tells you something's wrong. So checking those things out would be helpful. Ronald, definitely, as you work through this, please keep me in the loop, keep me up to date, comment on stuff. Oh, you have really high boost. What's your boost number at, Ron? This is an, oh, yeah, I read that part. I'm doing everything with one hand and a 78-year-old retired new sub engineer. Dude, Jay, you're the freaking man, though, making things happen. Well, way to keep after it. I know that crap ain't easy, so props. You definitely have my respect. Any way that I can help, I just keep me in the loop, Jay. I hopefully I'm helpful to you in getting this problem fixed. So Ron, if you have really high boost, see, typically high boost is caused by stuck vanes in the turbo. Where'd you get the turbo from? So just cruising at 20, you're at 16 to 18 psi. Do you know what your duty cycle is at that? That is high for just cruising down the highway at 2,500 RPM. DSP. Is that driven speed performance? I'm just trying to see what So Ron, I mean, I'll have to double check this with my truck when I get a chance, but I would be expecting like as long as it's flat, I don't know, 8, 10-ish. Dale Sport. Dale Sports Performance. Okay. Did the turbo also set? 16 to 18 seems high for like cruising down the road. Like I would expect under 10, honestly. Like whereas you're kind of like not far off like what a good pull should be. Yeah, I'm quick looking up some numbers here to see what people are saying. A lot of people are looking to quote cruising boosted stayed at the 7 to 10. Yeah, so a couple people writing that same. I bought a whole kit. Yeah, that's what I thought. So Ron, I would probably pull the exhaust side of like I'd probably pull the turbo and I'd probably check the exhaust side of it. Yeah, Ron, it should like a factory turbo should like while the stage one's a great turbo from KC. Like I'm not saying anything bad about them, but the factory turbo should run fairly close to that stage one. Maybe slightly more, but not like wildly so when just cruising at like a consistent 2500 RPM. So I'd probably pull that turbo and I would probably double check the exhaust side and clean it. Um, what do you see max? Like, have you done like a pull in it, like maybe like 0 to 70 or something, and just kind of seen what it does if you floor it? Um, the next challenge is mounting the turbo that I rebuilt with the KC360. Uh, yeah, dude. Nice rebuild kit on that truck. That is going to be a little bit of a project to get done for sure, but completely worth it, Jay. When it's done, you're going to love that. Nice balanced kit. You'll definitely need an extra hand. Careful not to under torque or over torque that wheel. I believe they have the markings on the wheel. Seems like your O5s are on 20 at wide open throttle. See, O5s are weird for boost. I've heard a couple guys kind of complain over the years about building boost in O5s because they got rid of the MAF sensor. It's more of a temperature sensor, if I remember correctly. What's tough with a smoke test on those is you really kind of like those boots require it's like I would try to hook up a setup where you could push smoke into the system but also some compressed air because you need a little compression to open up any potential tears in the boots. If there's no like resistance against it, then just doing a smoke test probably isn't going to show all the potential issues in that. Mongoose, welcome back, brother. It is good to have you. Those of you guys don't know, Mongoose is an OG here on the channel. He is one of the channel moderators. Back when I used to do these all the time. Mongoose, we're getting ready to start doing these more and more. I don't know if you saw, but I did one a week ago. Here I am. We're gonna try to really revive this channel now. Oh, you were 8. Awesome. I think what's funny is I think I made your account a moderator as well too, if I remember right. That's funny. Oh, that cracks me up. Well, I still have good taste in mods. 30. Ronald, well, thank you. I appreciate you coming, man. And please, anything I can do to help. A lot of these other guys in the chats will let you know. Like, we have a cool community here. The live streams are some of my favorite things to do, especially as like we get a lot of people in, because they are so beneficial, and the whole environment in the chat gets to be really cool. So hopefully we can get these back to how they used to be when we would do, I think there was a good period of time where like 50, 60 people would be hanging out in the chat, and like I couldn't even keep up with the chat. It was it would get out of control, but it was a lot of fun, and I'm hoping to get back there. Mongoose, that's too funny. How's the family doing, man? That's the other thing, is like some of these we've done so many, and you start to really kind of recognize people and form some cool friendships over the years. It's been one of the uh, most unexpected things with the channel when I started it, but it's something I've enjoyed a lot. You going to keep it up? Got a schedule? California sucks. So what I'm currently shooting for right now is a live stream every Sunday. I will say sometimes that is very hard with my work schedule. I work every other Sunday, and sometimes when I'm working, I'm kind of stuck there longer. If that happens, I will try to add a extra live, like an unscheduled one in, or maybe a later one. But at a minimum, I plan to do these like every other weekend right now. But I'm gonna shoot for every Sunday. That is my current goal. I'm expecting at a minimum to be able to do every other weekend, but I'm shooting for every Sunday night. I'm hoping to start listing the time earlier. Like, I think I posted this one 30 minutes before I did it. I'm hoping to have it posted by like noon Eastern time, that I'm going to plan to do it. But yeah, so this is one of my favorite things to do on the channel, is the live streams. Mongoose, that's funny. California sucks. Family's good. That cracks me up. But yeah, so that's the schedule. I will say this, that's kind of open for Mongoose. Don't start with Sinister. You know how I feel about that company. I think it'd be really funny if one day they actually like reached out and was just like, "Hey man, can you stop being mean?" And the one thing I gotta say is I don't even think all of their stuff's bad. I think they have a lot of poorly priced products. That is one thing. Like, there's I think they have one of the nicest looking cold side intercooler pipes for the 6.7. I'm just not spending the money to buy it. A lot of their other stuff looks relatively generic, but and that one's not even a good example of a poorly priced one at $340, because they are $300 to $400 for high end intercooler pipes is in the loop. Like, that's not entirely out of realism, but there are some stuff that here he's got me talking about them again. It is upsetting, some of the stuff they do, for sure, but not all their stuff is bad. But they do some silly crap that drives me nuts. They do have an open box one, which is kind of neat. I need to get off this website. Driving me nuts. What about oil leak passenger side rear? Took the high pressure. Put some more. Ron, I would, if you haven't already, I would check your intercooler boots. One of the most common causes of oil leaks that shows typically on that passenger side. So I would check the valve cover gasket. So get a flashlight, look for that. Typically, that's not super wet if it's coming from the intercooler boot. But my guess is the intercooler boot up top. Coming right out of the turbo, you're getting a lot of the crankcase vent pushing some oil in there, which is normal. That's fine. As that pressure coming right out of there, it's really high there, and you'll develop cracks in that boot that you'll only see under pressure. So it's literally like spraying oil residue in that area. And a lot of people misdiagnose it as a leaking oil cooler housing or a leaking high pressure oil pump housing. And realistically, it is that darn cac boot coming right off the turbo. I would say that's probably the number one oil leak on 6 liters that people misdiagnose the majority of the time, that intercooler boot. If you're keeping stock boots and you're looking to save a couple bucks, there's an okay set on Amazon. That's not the ideal, but it'll get the job done. If you're looking for a true upgrade, the Riff Raff diesels, I think, are the nicest. Will they stop overcharging for Cool Blue? I got a split in my breather hose. Is that a serious issue? I have never dealt with the breather and valve cover. Jay, they will probably never stop overcharging for the color blue. That's kind of their thing. Again, I do think it'd be hilarious if I ever got an email or something like, would you just try one of our products and stop being mean to us? I don't think I've ever really truly been mean to Sinister Diesel about their stuff. I do, like, I think my complaints about their company are 100% valid. And moving on from those guys. But Ron, so I would personally replace it. I did a crankcase vent filter delete video recently. That, depending on your year, may or may not be valid for you. But you want to look at you want to take a look at least having it vented properly, whether that's to atmosphere, if that's what you want, or to a catch can back to the intake, or just into the intake. As long as the bigger issue is the filter not being addressed. If the filter clogs, Ron, so for your 06, it won't be. The 06 has a different filter setup than what mine did. I have an early 04, so it has an 03 engine in it. But then I do talk about kind of like an issue is a lot of people don't address the filters. This is an issue we've seen on 6.7 Powerstrokes. If it can't vent properly, oil pressure will start pushing out gaskets in other places. So I will say, whether you choose to gut the filter and put it back on or just replace it, is honestly a perfectly fine thing. But make sure the filter gets addressed in some way. From there, the best thing I can say is I have never actually seen a failure of a engine or any part of it, whether it is vented to atmosphere or vented into the intake, as long as the pressure has an area to go. That's all that matters. The argument about people saying atmosphere versus intake is kind of dumb because it's not causing actual failures. What will cause failure and what will cause issue is a lack of being able to vent that. So if your filter is clogged or never replaced and it's not alleviating as much pressure, that can increase the oil consumption because that pressure will start pushing more oil with it. So get a new filter and then put that on. And on yours, that's much easier because you pull the Fickum bracket and then it's right there. Oh, Ron, no worries. You don't need to apologize, man. I'll explain this to you. I get it. If I ever say something that doesn't make sense, please call me out on it so I can address it. So your crankcase vent is just venting crankcase pressure. There's pressure from the turbo, from combustion. You want that pressure to go somewhere. If it has no place to go, it'll start pushing out oil gaskets somewhere and can cause leaks. So on an 06, on your driver side valve cover, there's a filter that sits on top and bolts in like 4 places to that valve cover. And then there's a hose coming out of that feeds into your air intake. So that crankcase vent filter, which is the piece on top, or people just call it the crankcase vent, but there's actual filter media inside there. You want to replace that. This will make sure that you have plenty of flow to alleviate that pressure. Once that part's done, it doesn't really matter if you choose to vent to atmosphere or choose to vent into the filter intake itself. Both answers are perfectly fine. Technically, from a legal standpoint, like when I say that either one's fine, it I mean like as far as neither one will cause you failures. Technically, to be legal, you need to go into the intake. Some people run catch cans. No, you definitely don't need a can. Where I think a catch can is valid, like it's okay if a little oil gets in there, it's not going to hurt anything. Where I think a catch can is valid is if you've completely gotten rid of the filter media, then I think they can be helpful. In my case, I have no filter media in mine. So essentially, I'm just venting whatever gets in there. The filter in those is meant to catch oil. Um, like it's not pushing a bunch of debris and stuff up. It's meant to catch oil and just let the pressure itself like be relieved. So where a catch can is helpful is if you have no filter. Other than that, I run them right into the intake. Uh, I don't waste my time on I don't waste my time on if I need to run a hose down along the frame. Is that wrong from a reliability standpoint? Not at all. It will not cause your engine to fail. The thing that causes issues is a lack of being able to alleviate the pressure. Uh, yeah, yeah. The catch can. I will say this. People think catch cans by themselves do something. They don't. All a catch can does, excuse me, a catch can will catch oil and some from like oil vapors, and you'll collect oil in them. If you have a properly functioning filter, there'll be minimal of this. There will still be some, but there won't be a lot. Ron, you do plug the intake if you run it to atmosphere. Don't leave that intake part open. So you will want some kind of plug to go in there. But people think the catch can itself helps, and it doesn't. It just catches the oil in it. It becomes a new maintenance item as well. Uh, so catch cans on the 6.7, like people call them these internal catch cans, which it's basically a baffle system that sits inside, and then you just run a hose somewhere down along. Um, they're essentially all the same concept. It's slightly different ways, but a catch can by itself does nothing. Um, it's essentially looking at ways. Now, again, I said if like for me, I think there'd be an argument for a catch can is not a bad idea because I have no filter media in there. In the early trucks, you can't get replacement filters for it, so you need to convert it, which requires a new Fickum bracket. It requires a new valve cover, and then you need to buy the actual filter itself for it. So it gets to be pricey when you start looking for these used parts somewhere and then one new part. Mongoose Turbo Time USA, huge shout out to those guys, 6 Obros for 10% off. It used to be 5, now just 10% off your 6.0 Powerstroke turbo. Well, actually, any turbo. Cummins, Duramax, 6 liters, 6.7s. They do 7.3s as well these days, which they've on and off done those, but they have been consistent with having, the old 7.3s now. At some point, I'd actually love to try that on my dad's truck. Where is the 7.3 now? There they are. Yeah, I would definitely love to try one of the 7.3 turbos out. I haven't pulled a 7.3 turbo before, but I do think it would be a fun little project to do at some point. Ron, you're welcome. I'm glad I could help. And thank you for your support, man. Help me get better miles per gallon. Ooh, $6 a gallon. I could not afford to drive at that. We haven't quite been that bad. We've been bad from time to time. I did a video kind of talking about how much horsepower or how many miles per gallon a 500 horsepower truck gets, and it was my. I'm trying to think what I had. I think I was running. I think it was my big turbo, my 66 millimeter. I got 17 around town, and I contribute that really to airflow modifications without increasing toll on it. Ron, I hear you, but I will say this: there is some I do think there's ways to get better fuel economy out of these things. I love these trucks. The fuel economy part can be a little rough sometimes, but I recommend this to everybody. BD exhaust manifolds, BD Y pipe, get better intercooler pipes. There's a lot of good options. Blessed Performance, No Limits, SoCal Billet, all great options for intercooler pipes on these trucks. Is anyone still here? Because it says I have 0. I don't know if that's a glitch or if everyone left me or if YouTube booted everybody. Oh, so my count's just wrong. That makes me feel a little better. Better intercooler as well, and the ODOG intake manifold. I think all of those things coupled together will help increase. Exhaust. Well, Mongoose, what can you do with exhaust out by you? Can you do like a 3.5-inch downpipe to a 4-inch? That is my efficiency build. If you forget any of that, I just did a tow video where basically I say all of that. Mongoose, I'm just saying Pennsylvania is a cool state. We have a lot of cool freedoms here. And you don't have to worry about getting pulled over typically for a loud exhaust. I've never been pulled over for my exhaust. Mongoose, that's right. I forget that. Thank you for your service, brother. Hopefully they get you stationed in a better state soon. Get you out of California. Back to safety. But in that video, I really talk about, in my opinion, if you want to make a 6-liter run really, really well without increasing lag and all that stuff, those are the things to do. They don't increase strain on the system. If you just put a bigger turbo on, you'll get better overall performance if tuned correctly, but you require more energy to move that turbo to get it to work. Whereas all the other stuff that I just said actually doesn't increase the strain on the system. In fact, it makes things easier from a better, more efficient intercooler. The ODOG intake manifold lets air get everywhere it needs to. Getting all that stuff out with the BD exhaust manifolds. I think the BD Y pipe is one of the nicest developed. A lot of the Y pipes, when they get to kind of that coupler part at the top, the collector, if you look at how they're jammed in there, they can't possibly have a great flow path. There's got to be some turbulence there. The BD collector just provides a nice, smooth transition. I think it just works really, really well for that. And those are the things I think that will increase the overall efficiency of the engine. And then again, a good quality tune. Blessed Performance gives the channel a discount. 6 Obros, it is an affiliate discount code, but 10% off your tuning from those guys. Definitely let them know I sent you. I'll be reviewing his tunes in the near future when my 6-liter is back, which should be this week. We're doing some stuff to it, nothing major, no major teardowns, trying to just fix a small oil leak is all. Those are the things I would definitely take a look at. Ron, the exhaust side is definitely important. Part of why that is the exhaust side drives your turbo. So you have a turbo driven engine. If you lose drive pressure or exhaust back pressure, you will not get your turbo spooled up fast enough to kind of do what they need to do. You'll still get there, but if you have some leaks, it won't be as efficient. Ended up with a tablespoon of oil every 5K. Uh, Dude, that's not a bad Jay, I'd say that's a good, like, you don't have any consumption issues. Like, if that's all the more oil, that's a solid running truck, man. So that's good. Uh Hampton, VA, thanks for your service, Mongoose. Mongoose is the man. What do you think of the 9 blade and 11 blade turbo? I think the 9 blade and the 11 blade are answers to problems that we didn't have. Um, I agree with the 11 blade more than the 9 blade, but my preference has been for a long time 10 blade turbos. I think are kind of the sweet spot for 6 liters. Um, there's a little bit of an argument for the 13 blade. However, they switched to the 13 blade more for quieting the turbo down. Uh, but I think the 9 blade you encounter too much lag, although I will be reviewing it after the stage 2.5 after my stage 2.5 video goes live. I'll be looking at doing a swap to the 9 blade, and then I'll be reviewing that. But yeah, they were things put out. In my opinion, they're not put out because we needed them. I do think the 13 blade's too restrictive, so I can understand somebody maybe towing that wants a little more back pressure for cruising speeds and such. But at the end of the day, I don't think it was really needed. The 9 blade, I think, is just the only reason anybody drives. If you made a 9 blade sound like a 10 blade, nobody would buy a 9 blade. People want it to be loud with their relatively factory trucks because it does sound like man, that thing's making cool noises. It's got to be making power. Um, so I mean, I will say this: I love options at the same time, but the 9 blade craze that's happening right now is kind of annoying. It does not perform as well, regardless what anybody tells you. It just doesn't. There's too much lag behind it. You shouldn't be towing with it. And if you say it tows well, it's because you haven't really given a 10 blade a shot. I would tow with a 13 blade before a 9 blade. I would then have a preference to the 11 blade, but the 10 blade is definitely my favorite. I would love to. I'm going to review the 9 blade from Turbo Time. I would love to review the 11 blade. Um, Again, I can kind of see a purpose for it, but I don't know until I actually would have it in my truck and be able to like kind of test it. But in theory, slightly less lag than a 10 blade, probably not by much, but probably slightly less. Um, Still probably sounds good. Still probably got a decent whistle to it. But the 9 blade, yeah, I'm gonna review it. I'm gonna run it in my truck, but at the same time, I kind of like hate the idea of it. Um, just because it seems like a lot for not a lot of benefit. Again, it's because people love the noise, which is fair, but it is, I mean, it is ear piercing loud. I will let you know about the Fickum tune because I'm going with them for my Fickum tune. I plan to be reviewing Fickum tunes this winter. So winter plans are Fickum tune reviews, PCM tune reviews, and there's a local guy that might be having me do a build on a 6 liter, uh, which would be very similar to that tow build video I just did recently, that stage one. Um, but there might be some good videos of me tearing out a bunch of stuff on a 6 liter and putting some cool stuff on. If the EBT has a leak in the pipe and the guy who worked on my truck didn't care about. Oh, so maybe he. Well, I mean, so you do have the pipe coming up out of the exhaust manifold. I don't know that I'd take it to where you took it before. This person did not sound great. Oh, he broke the. What a goofball. Uh, yeah, I don't know that I'd go back to them, especially if they didn't make it right and just and fix it. Um, I have seen, so I can't say I've seen many broken um back pressure tubes. Like there is a tube that comes up and runs beside the thermostat. But I have seen them clog. And typically, what people have done, I believe, is run a pipe cleaner just down and back them, and that's normally enough. So that is something you could consider doing to see if that kind of clears some of that stuff out for you. That would be a big help if you are having an issue. Mongoose, what do you if you had to pick one of those turbos, what would you do? What you just leave the medical field and fix this? I cannot just leave the medical field and start fixing 6 liters. Um, one, while I have a very stressful job, I do on some level still like it. And I'm very driven in it. I'm actually looking at getting a new certification for it. And I am considering cross training to ICU while still staying what's called a med surge tele nurse. I don't talk much about my career. That's kind of deliberate, to be honest, but I am still working very hard in it. But yeah, no. So I'm still very dedicated to what I'm doing. But I will say this: if YouTube was successful, there is definitely a day where I wouldn't mind just doing YouTube and fixing trucks and stuff. So. Uh, what's the tube on the far driver side? Um, do you mean the tube that comes up for like out of the exhaust manifold? There's a stainless, I think it's stainless steel tube that comes up out of the exhaust manifold and then plants itself up by the thermostat housing. That's to measure exhaust back pressure. How do you feel about the idea of a 6.4 turbo swap? So I have I have been following the 6 liter community for 14 years now. So 14 years I've been following this. And I have read multiple threads of people claiming the 6.4 turbo swap. In theory, it works. In actuality, it does not work at all. I have not seen anybody like really have it set up and running well. Now, that doesn't mean you can't run compounds on these trucks. You have a couple issues with the 6.4 between controlling it. I would not recommend it. You're going to have more headaches, and it's going to be expensive. You got to relocate a bunch of stuff. You need to get reasonable oil pressure in a way that's not set up there. I would, if you really wanted to run combat. I think people think 6.4 turbos because you can get two, and it. Hey Ronald, it's great to see you, man, and thank you for joining the channel. We appreciate it. I look forward to catching up with you more and hearing about your projects. In short, man, the 6.4 turbo setup, people think it's going to be an easy, reasonable priced way to fit them in there, but it doesn't work on the 6 liter. I would not recommend it. If you wanted to go compounds and keep a VGT, which is what I want to do long term, get a SoCal billet piping kit and rock a 480 out front. And there's people that know how to tune that and get it working. You'll have headaches because it's still a big project, but you'll have less of a headache than if you tried making 6.4 turbos work on your 6-liter. Nice. You put a 6-liter in a Jeep? That's got to be a fun Jeep. Need to build another 6.0 for my turbo. Just got it back from the shop. So I don't think the stock heads are the most reliable. UCF builds a great head off of the factory one, where they machine out the factory valve seat. They put in, which is just hardened iron. They do a pressed in valve seat. There's a lot of good heads on the market. Iron heads, even though Kill Devil and I have butted heads recently on some stuff, their iron heads I can still recommend. Powerstroke products have a good reputation for their heads. I know a lot of local shops are using them. UCF has a lifetime warranty on their heads. That doesn't cover labor, which sucks, but you'd be able to at least have your head replaced for little to no cost. So for a tow rig, I just don't think you really there's enough reason to go to an aluminum head. So I'd probably be looking at PSP or UCF would be my current go-to recommendation. O-ringed, definitely an O-ringed head. But I'd go iron head. My question would be, why would you want to switch to the 6.4? Is there some sort of turbo problem? I get to take it out in a couple of days, but I need compound. Wait, in the Jeep or in your tow build? The tow build, I think it's Blessed Performance is towing with compounds. I want to say it's a VGT in the Valley, an S2R maybe in the Valley, and then a 4 something out front. The 400 series turbos is what most people are putting in front for the compounds. But I think people have the idea that maybe they can do the 6.4 turbos and have compound turbos for a reasonable price, but it's going to be headache. Tuning's going to be an issue. I just think going with true compounds with a nice piping kit, none of it's going to be easy to do. You're going to need to get a scavenger pump, I believe they're called, for oil to that other turbo. You're going to need to replace your oil pan to be able to set up an oil drain and stuff. Like it is a lot of work. Good Mechanics swears by DK. I'm semi-familiar with DK. I know them. I've been on their website a lot. I just don't have enough experience with them at this time to really say much. Previous truck was a 6.4 pre-band mini-max intake. Oh, dude, that truck had to be a monster. The 6.4 is not a bad truck. It is a problematic engine, unfortunately. But when they're running well, and I think now today, I have a smudge on my computer I dislike. I think today we have enough good information on them that we can make them just complete powerhouses, but it's expensive. It's in the Jeep, pretty bad turbo lag. What transmission are you running in the Jeep? Overkill. I'm saying UFC or Powerstroke products, iron heads. They both have iron heads. PSP might have an aluminum head, but I don't think they do. Most people building aftermarket heads are using the same iron casting or very, very similar. But I've heard a lot of good about both of them. UCF iron heads do have a lifetime warranty. There's that. PSP, I'm sure, has a warranty. I just don't know what it is. But both, I think, are viable options. And despite even my frustration with how my current build has gone, with cracking rocker, like 3 different rocker boxes, and being told there's nothing wrong, I still feel like it's okay to recommend Kill Devil Diesel's iron heads. I'm not sold on icons. I'm not unsold on them. They're great flowing head, but for a tow build, I just don't think they're worth it. Like a good ported head, I think would be fine. Personally, UFC, I think it's like $900 for a port, which is not bad at all. What's interesting with converters, so I do think a lot of people with compounds go like way at like 2600 stall on their converter. I'm running like 2100 stall on mine, which can help when you have a little bit bigger of a turbo. But I do think Blessed Performance told me recently, I was talking to him the other day on a message. I don't have it up here. I wish I did, but I think he said he was running, I think he said he was running like a factory stall, which is cool. Like if he's running a factory stall on compounds, like I'm all for it. The idea of it, I mean, it'd be interesting to see what 2600 stall feels like driving. But I'm not sure. I eventually want to do compounds real bad, and I'll say this, when I first do it, I don't plan to change my stall. If I need to, I will. Like I said, I'm running a little bit higher than factory, around 2100 RPM for my stall, but we'll see when that time comes, because that's a ways away. So, guys, I do think I am going to close out the live stream, though this is something we are going to, I am committed to doing these more regularly, so stay tuned for these. Stock head's ready to go. Should I do something? Overkill, I will say this, I would recommend this. I would have I have no issue with factory heads, other than I would have this valve seats cut and true valve seats pressed in, and make sure the valve recession is set correctly. That is not an inexpensive thing to have done, but that, I will say this, I would not just put them on there, and I would also get them O-ringed. Once those 2 things are done, the factory head is actually pretty good. At 331, your head lifted, that is not a bad mile marker to have a head gasket go. Think about this, man. Some of those guys in the very beginning that had like early head gasket failure, how frustrating that had to be. Like to be those guys under 50,000 miles with head gaskets going, or 10. I mean, I don't know if there's any verified, but I have heard horror stories of people losing them at 10,000 miles. So man, 330 for a head gasket failure. I can't be mad at that, man. But anyway, everybody, thank you. I do think we're going to close this out now. I will be back next week. We will continue. Thank you for all your support on the channel. Stay tuned. We got a lot of videos coming, and a lot more live streams. So everybody, I hope you all have a good night, and I will see you soon.